and then we'll get going. So thank you for everybody for being here. And as we had talked on some of our individual calls, we did a series of stories and a bunch of interviews with people in town about the status of the art scene in Boulder. Of course, now is an interesting time to talk about anything but staying at home and being healthy. But we really want to kick off the conversation around the art infrastructure within Boulder. I think we uncovered by talking to a lot of people in some of these stories is that we feel like there's a lot of art here or a lot of potential here, but we don't necessarily see it. And the purpose of this conversation is to kind of highlight what may be missing and what maybe a vibrant scene would look like. And the idea was to get a diverse group of influential people in the Boulder art scene together to give their take and kind of uncover some of these things, to push the conversation forward and hopefully come up with some takeaways or even some like potential action items to potentially scratch the surface of how to make the scene better and more vibrant than it is right now. Because I think we all feel the vibrancy that Boulder has, but it doesn't necessarily show up in the art scene. So I think I'll first introduce everybody on the panel. So we have Lauren Click, who's the grants coordinator for the City of Boulder Arts and Culture. They manage a variety of programs, including a grants program and artist in residence program. Is that correct? Do I have that right? You can correct me on when we go through. Okay.
Okay.
Then we have Lisa Nesmith, an artist, and she's president of the NoBo Art District, which is interesting. It's the city's only designated art district, and we'll talk about some of the challenges and some of the successes they've seen there, hopefully on this call. And I think she can provide some unique insight into trying to focus, unleashing or exhibiting the arts in one specific area, and maybe that could be a good test case for how to start some of what we're trying to do with making the scene a little bit more vibrant. Then we have Will Day, who's a full-time painter from Boulder. He has a studio near downtown or off Pearl Street. I should say it's a little bit east of downtown. But he's found success as a painter. He started in 2007 and 2008, I think. We can correct us when we bring him on, ask him a few questions. But I think he provides an interesting perspective on what it's like to be a working artist here. And as we know, full-time artists are few and far between. So I think he adds an interesting element there. Then we have Todd Berger and Lucian Föer. They run the commercial design firm Berger Föer. They have office space right downtown on the West End, just off the West End, the Pearl Street Mall. They also are artists themselves, and they've started kind of a renewed focus on building that aspect of their work and lives. Then we have Sandra Firmin, who is the chief curator at the CU Museum of Art. And she works with a lot of young people, and like a lot of the panelists, most of them has had a life steeped in art and lived in cities with vibrant. Toddy Sharpton, who is the assistant editor of BLDRfly, who wrote a lot of these stories, who talked to a lot of people, who provided a lot of insight to this. So first of all, I want to ask us a question to each of you, give everybody a chance to answer it. But as I said in the intro before we started, that I would love this to be a conversation. So when somebody's talking and one other panelist feels like there's something, they have a question to follow, so we can follow threads throughout, and then we'll try to give everybody a chance to answer that question before we move on to the next one. And okay, let's start with Lauren. We want to ask, what's your sense of the Boulder art scene, and what do you feel like? How would you describe it? And why don't we start there? And along with that is, what do you think would make it? What would you think a vibrant scene would look like in Boulder? Because I think that's one of the questions we have to answer here. Is we know what it looks like in a big city, but what would it look like here? So Take it away, Lauren.
Sure. So, hi, everybody. It's nice to meet some of you and see some of your lovely faces. So we have the third highest number of artists per capita in America. And that's astounding. I mean, I think it's remarkable. We'll be doing that research comes from 4 years ago. So we're going to be updating it next year. But I still think it feels that way. I should note that I came here 3 years ago, so from New York City. So my perspective is very recent, and it'd be really, I'm looking forward to hearing from them about how it's changed over time, because I think there has been a lot of change, particularly in the last 5 or 10 years. But we in office grant $925,000 this year, and that's to 97 different grant recipients, which means that there are literally thousands, upwards of 5,000 artists in Boulder.
As we talked when we did the pre-interview, you mentioned, and in one of the censuses you all did, you said there's a lot of artists. It's not an art city, Boulder. And it's like, what do you feel like, if you had to put your thumb on, what's the disconnect there?
You know, I was looking through our research again to respond to that. And the thing that struck me, which I can connect if you want to put it into the links for the video, wages and income from the professional artists. 80% of our artists have a second job outside of their art profession, which means that people are not living as professional artists, right? They're living, doing other non-arts jobs or teaching or seeking, doing arts practice independently. And I think that speaks to a lot of the market economy, but then also the culture of treating it as a secondary piece in your life. Even Lisa, sorry to call you out, Lisa, but before we got on, she said my real job or my day job, would you say? But she's an artist and runs an arts organization and is always using this, like your day job, right? What do you call it?
It's my straight job. It's my straight job.
I think
that's the best version of it.
I think that's a feature of a lot of artists, and I guess that goes to one of the challenges that Boulder presents is just it's an expensive place to live and to make a living. So there probably limits the amount of people that can do their art full time, because as we know, working as a full-time artist, it's hard to make a living. Which I think would be interesting, if you don't mind, if we switch to Will now. If Will's there, and Will. We talked a little bit about your experience here as an artist. What have you seen that's worked or not worked as you developed your career here? Here
okay. So good to meet everybody. Really excited. It's been very lonely these last couple of months. Wow. Yeah. I don't know how everyone else is feeling. I'm in my studio here in Boulder. To answer your question, I've been a full-time artist for almost 11 years, but I didn't come to this profession as an artist. So I have a different perspective, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's better at all, but I came from the world of finance and Wall Street and real estate. And so I didn't know what art really meant. So I may not be your typical platform to figure out how to have this solid conversation, because I'm almost coming at it as a business entrepreneur.
Yeah. So, which we had talked about in our profile view of the way you approached it. But I think what's interesting is like now you are a successful artist here. And what is like, how do you connect to any scene, or if at all? And I think we started scratching the surface of that when we spoke. But what's your relationship like with the Boulder art community? And maybe that's one way to go into it.
Great question. I don't know anybody. Like I didn't know Sandra. I didn't know, Lisa. I've never met them. I've been doing this full time for 11 years, really interactive. We have a really strong base. And I'm like, I feel isolated. It's unbelievable how much I don't know what's going on in the art community. I just been really focused on obviously creating inspiring and timeless art, creating my voice, and also making a living full time. So again, I don't have a lot of time. I'm trying to network, and I do a lot of volunteer, and I do a lot of stuff for my studio with high school and some college students, but I don't know some of the other administrators and some of the big kind of players
I think you bring up a good point of, and Toddy mentions this. Toddy is an oil painter as well, and does art. It's like artists are kind of naturally hermits. So, but I wonder if it's interesting. I wonder if we're uncovering something that actually is missing here, like a community or easy way for artists and people that support the arts. And we're specifically speaking about the visual arts in this case. Yes. To have a more connected scene. I think Sandra and I were talking before. It's like, and then a couple of others is there's something here, but there's also a lot of disparate pockets, and there's not a lot of unified a cohesion across different mediums and also different segments of what people do. So I think it's interesting that we started pulling that thread. That actually might be one way to. And I don't know what that looks like because everybody's time is limited. And like you mentioned, you're focused on refining your voice, creating your art, and making a living. And we all are. So where at what line does that become exciting and like it's worth it to connect and engage in a community? Which brings me to Todd, because Todd, I'd like to shift to you because you've tried this before, right? You've developed you and Lucian, I think, or maybe it was just you back in the day. You said in the early 2000s, you all used to host DJ parties and try to cultivate kind of what I would envision a vibrant scene to look like. Talk a little bit about that, your experience there, and then I'll have like some follow-up questions there.
Yeah, cool. Happy to, and Lucian can contribute. And we'll hit on something interesting that I also think is just really smart and relevant, and that other artists that I know that are full-time, that are making it like Will, to a lesser degree, to a larger degree, they're all treating their art career very entrepreneurially and in essence, like taking it like a serious business. And a lot of them, frankly, don't have time to network and get engaged in community because they have their gallerists and they have some collectors and they have some relations with museum people and they have some business collaborative relationships, and those are generating all their revenue. And so they're focused on those relationships. And I can relate because we have this with our art, which is about a third of our practice and 2/3 of it is design. And so while we are heavily engaged in community and try to play and a lot and remain connected, although I haven't met all of you on this call, we're super focused on managing those connections and the opportunities that come from those in a similar way. But so getting back to early 2000s, I'll just like give a quick history. So yeah. I've been practicing design and art in Boulder since the mid 90s, largely with a design bend. I've had my own studio since end of 96. And so have always supported the arts, contributed to the arts. And like, I have fairly deep connections into the Denver graffiti scene and larger national street art scene from the early 90s. So have some roots there, but getting into the early 2000s as my design studio was evolving and I was interested in making more art alongside with Lucian. This is when we started working together. We've been working together for 18 years now. We rebranded our design studio and opened a boutique in front of it that was an art gallery, art sort of concept. We had 50 people blogging internationally, artists all over the world. They exhibited in our little space that sometimes bled into our design studio. And we had a lot of exhibitions there, artists from South America, Southeast Asia, Europe.
At that time, did you have like a lot of the local artists and people involved in the arts showing up to some of those events?
Yeah, we had a big scene. Like I would say, you know, we were on 13th and Pearl, and like, you know, 300 people.
Great location.
200 people would come out for a party. Half those from Denver. We'd we'd feature a musician. We'd have an artist, usually a DJ.
That's
but
the way to do it. Yeah.
And that was a secondary business to our design studio business, and the two worked in tandem. We collaborated with a lot of brands and hooked a lot of our artists up with those brands. We sold a bunch of our own art, sold a lot of our artists' art. Like I was telling you back, I was just gonna say, 2004, you know, we we sold a piece for Jason Telke, who's a really established Denver artist, for 25 grand, which is like, that's a big art sale for a contemporary work in Boulder. And we were only taking 20% because these were all our friends, right?
Yep. So there's two things I want to follow up there. Like, I think you're touching on, one is like Boulder being a marketplace for like sustainable values or prices that people can actually sell and make art, and known as a place to go for art. So the first thing I want to follow up on is like those parties. One, I don't know, and maybe some of you do. Does that exist now in Boulder? It doesn't seem like it does. Like, no, kind of like,
not on that scale. One other point: most of our art sales were from out of towners, or they were online. Very few of them were from Boulder natives, because the art entity we were running at the time had a pretty big international rep for being in Boulder because of the blog and some things we were doing on the web. But no, there's not a lot of that happening. There's quite a bit more of it happening in Denver, and a number of people that were fairly instrumental in the art scene in the late 90s, early 2000s in Boulder live in Denver now. And they're more connected to the Denver Art Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Clifford Still. There's a lot of stuff happening in Denver.
So the question I have now is like, do you even feel like, because it's not happening, there's not that feeling of like a little bit more of an organic party or a gallery, and I feel like that's like an important element to the scene, like people coming together. And I think we were talking about with Will, is like he would show up, or like people like him would show up, and there would be a place where it felt like more like grassroots and vibrant, and outside of like the Museum of Boulder, or not that there's anything against that, but more like guerrilla feeling and kind of like on the streets. I don't think
there's a lot of it happening. I think it's kind of costly to pull off, right? But to summarize something that I shared yesterday is like Will's a real painter. He's doing it. He makes fucking great paintings in Boulder. He's clearly got a business, so he's got some people paying attention. Not enough people know about what he's doing. I mean, I only really learned about Will, I think, about 2 years ago, because we share the same CPAs, and I saw a bunch of them work in our CPA's office, and I was like, wow, these fucking paintings are great.
They're great, yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. That was how Lucian and I learned about Will. But we didn't know him, and a lot of folks in Boulder, younger people today, definitely don't know us, don't know Lisa, don't know Will, don't know Sandra, right? I mean, like the CU Art Museum, it's a fucking gem of a museum, man. I mean, it's like, I think very few people utilize it. The archive is freaking brilliant. That's tangential, right? But we have that resource in Boulder, and it's underutilized. And so just coming full circle, I'll drop one more point and then end it. Go like people that have money here that buy art mostly don't see Boulder as an art place or Boulder artists as real artists, by and large, and they buy art on the coast or overseas. And there's a lot of people with that kind of money here, but the other side of that is, while there's lots of people with that kind of money here, they're buying their 5th mountain bike and a $2,000 fly rod and a new SUV, and they're using all that money to play outside, and they, frankly, for better or worse, haven't developed the kind of appreciation for art that people that come from cities who tend to live indoors.
So it goes to the point of like, there doesn't seem to be a marketplace here. Like you go to Santa Fe, you go to LA, you go to New York to get your art.
Well, it's in the culture there, but the art entrepreneurs, and there's some of them here, the gallerists and the people that have wanted to sell art, have had a notoriously hard time doing it. I can't say if they've done it right or wrong. I can tell you we ran our little entity for 3 years, and it barely broke even every year while our design studio was doing really well. And after the 3rd year, we were like, fuck it, it's just too much work. We loved it, but it just, it was a headache. So breaking down your studio to have an exhibition every month and working with people internationally, when, we had big clients at the time, footing the bill for all that shit.
Yeah, totally. So let's move to Sandra. We'll pick back up on some of these points.
Yeah.
Sandra, Todd mentioned the art museum, which you're a chief curator of at CU, and I, for one, haven't ever been there, which I'm I feel a little bit ashamed by it, but I don't think I know that well. And I think maybe that's the case for a lot of people in Boulder. So it's like, I think there's some resources here, and like we're finding there's some connections here that just aren't being made. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience in trying to get people there, and kind of where it fits, where do you see it fitting, and how in the Boulder scene in general, and like what you've tried to do, and what some of the challenges you see of integrating it more and becoming a more integrated part of the whole city.
So I would just echo a lot of what has been said. Really nice meeting you. I think it's telling that we don't know each other. And I think going back to like what is the vibrant art scene, it's a really robust ecosystem where people are collaborating and they're partnering with each other, and they know each other. It's mutually supportive. I think we're in an interesting position because, of course, our core audience will always be the students. And so we are we have this like inward, outward facing mission where we are working with faculty and students to integrate their our collections and exhibitions into their coursework, but also we have this like public facing mission to be a resource for the Boulder community. And some of the things that we've done, we always showcase in the summer a local artist and really celebrate the talent here. And we have a very robust advisory board that really is thinking about how to create partnerships with different art organizations or different organizations within. So we actually just, one of the new things that we are trying to develop is a community, what we're calling a community marketing committee, but mostly it's outreach, because we're organizing a lot of exhibitions, and our collections actually connect to a lot of issues that are really, that Boulder cares deeply about, and people in Boulder care deeply about. So issues of climate change, or where we were going to show an artist in the fall that was really would really connect to kind of Naropa and the spiritual community.
So connecting to some of the themes that are kind of here and people care about. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about is like a vibrant scene really thrives with young people. And of course, CU is a font of youth there. And we talked a little bit about some of the disconnect there between some of the young people participating. And that's probably largely a larger issue of like CU being kind of an island within Boulder. But maybe talk a little bit about what you feel like can be done to integrate some of the students into, I don't know, inject them into what's happening in Boulder wider than the campus.
I think they need to be excited about ecosystem, or in Boulder, the arts ecosystem. So Todd mentioned
they need a party like Todd to go to.
Yeah, well, Todd, exactly. And I think Todd said people are going to Denver, and I think it's the same with the students. They're going to the galleries in Denver, they're going to Denver, and I think that's where they find their excitement. And I don't know if it's an issue of red tape or the bureaucracy of both Boulder and CU, that it's really hard to be experimental and be more grassroots.
You know, it's interesting you say that, and that brings us to Lisa, because she works, she's the president of the NoBo Art District, which is spans, I don't know, 10 blocks on the far northern end of Boulder. And we talked yesterday, Lisa, about some of the challenges you've seen. One, it's a volunteer-only organization. There's not much funds to expend there, and there's some artists, there's some galleries up there, and they do the first Fridays art walks. But talk a little bit about what you feel would help make that area even more vibrant, because it's the only official art district in Boulder. you can kind of sense something happening there, but it feels like it's a little dampened.
Right. And yeah, and we did talk about that yesterday. I think some of the dampening really has to do with so the city of Boulder, I think, is a very conservative place, and it's got this reputation of being progressive and, you know, edgy, and I don't find it to be. I think it's a very conservative place. And so my hope over the next few years is that really as the NoBo Art District grows and expands in what we do, is that we can empower artists to feel like they can take some chances, and they can take some chances out in the public realm. And most of what we try to do is to bring more visibility and public awareness to the artists up there. We have a huge number of artists working in their own private studios. We have had more galleries than we do now. We have one gallery that, you know, their bread and butter is framing, and Mercury Framing. They've been there for a long time, and that's where they make their money.
In the same category.
I'm sorry, what?
15th Street Studio downtown on Walnut.
Yes, absolutely. And so their bread and butter is something else. But I mean, Mercury Framing has their gallery booked out for 5 years. There is such demand. And in 2008, 2009 is when NoBo started very grassroots with 5 people. So it's grown a lot over the years.
Well, you all are trying to. There's a push now to make it a formal business improvement district, or to get like membership among the small businesses there, or the businesses located there, and then maybe building funding structure for this.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we've been working towards a business improvement district for 2 years now, and the city of Boulder does not have a lot of experience with bids, and so that's part of what we've run up against. But you know, there are 2 bids in town. One is on Uni Hill, and it's more of a parking district, and the other is Pearl Street, and Pearl Street is a good example of how one operates. But yeah, I mean, that would provide permanent, steady funding for the activities of NoBo.
So it's interesting, and I think this came up in a number of conversations, and Lauren, maybe you can speak to this. I know maybe not officially, but the city, the city, I think all of us, I know I would recognize it as being on the more conservative side. And like, for example, permitting, and maybe even allowing us to close down certain streets for First Friday events or whatever it may be. What's your sense of, Lauren, since you're a little bit within it, of the city able to, I don't know, allow for some of this more flexibility? I know there's a variety of ways it can go. One is permitting for events, and then 2 is probably opening up different avenues for support, and also, you can go a lot of ways. Interested in what you would say.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how much I can say to it, but from the inside and from the outside, we all know that permitting takes a very long time. Permissions take a very long time for closing down streets, for public art. I mean, one of the things that I think when I think of a vibrant community is public art. It's like visibility. And Lisa's done a great job up in NoBo of adding more murals and making it look more, just the vibe of walking around, and it looks artistic. But I think we can all talk to like the permitting process and how long it takes and how expensive it is. Even for the staff of the city, we have to pay for some of our permits also. So like between offices, there's also things like lighting and how much lighting you can do in the evening. So for public art, if an artist is asking for lighting or is asking for sound, there's enormous limits to that.
So
that we're working on.
I'm envisioning like, so I moved to Boulder from Oakland, California about 4 years ago. and I saw the first Friday events that happened organically there, and like it started rogue, and they just shut down the street, and it was artisans selling like just little hand paintings and like, and it just exploded, and it had its own issues, and then the city eventually had to end up sanctioning it and controlling it to a certain degree. But and I explored this like maybe 6 months ago with a local gallery owner. It's like, hey, can we start exploring like how to create that same energy? And I think it goes to an element of a vibrancy. It's like, and I know you're not speaking officially for the city, but I feel like and that might be one avenue to pursue, and that might be barking up a tree that's not going to get anywhere. But I feel like that's maybe one thing that we can come away with, like maybe working on getting the city to relax on some of these event permitting for arts.
Right. We're certainly trying ourselves. So we're like working on it because we're running up into the same problems. The permits are the city, we have to follow the same permits, right? So we want to do cool stuff. And we do cool stuff. We just need more flexibility.
Maybe that's like one of the, because like what I want this not just to be talk, I want this follow up. So like I would love to maybe follow up with you offline and just like get a feel for what we can, whether steps and who the people are to talk to, because maybe just start pulling the thread and see if like we can make this more public, a little push, and see who the people are to talk to about what's possible there.
For sure. And there's people that are working on it. I would love to get your energy and like outside perspective. And I did want to mention too, that falls, I mean, it makes me think of venues, that what you're talking about are venues of different levels, which is what Todd talked about already, that to have venues that are smaller, more flexible, that can allow for more artists. I mean, like Lisa said too, booking for 5 years. Like I worked at a museum in New York and we booked out for 3 years. That's crazy. But there's just a huge hole of where we need venues. Even our community cultural plan, like the city approved plan, says that we need more venues for everything, not just the visual arts. Like we're talking to people in the visual arts here, which we need, but also dance, theater, classical music, right? Like there's enormous gaps in our
so that's
venues.
It's and I think that's kind of the supply and demand issue that it's facing a lot of people in Boulder in general, like housing and space, because it's just limited and expensive and it's overly zoned and tightly zoned. I want to push back. We have 5 minutes, and we can maybe have a little bit over 5 minutes, and I want to respect everybody's time. But it feels like one of the other threads we started pulling is like just the connectivity that seems to be lacking, even from the people on this call. That it feels like all of you guys, I don't know what the mechanism is for that, but like what could be possible to bring to make it incentivize, like where it makes sense, so people you in the community would come together on something. I mean, I know we have our own ideas. We want to make this actually, this would ideally be a live event, and we would show up and like it'd be a party, and like, and I know Will, you and I talked, like he has a great studio, he wants to host events there, but like I think that's one thread to pull out of this, is like how to make it such that it's fun and actually people like you all get something out of coming together. And I don't know what that looks like, but I think that's one of the things that I see maybe could help.
So let me just say, I think that the arts organizations, many of them, and operate in this town very siloed and really operating in their own bubble and sort of and like overly protective of their little slice of dirt, their little turf. And so the connections don't happen organically. I will say I started a few years ago reaching out to some of the different arts leaders. And we get together and have coffee, just one-on-one. Sandra, I've never reached out to you. I apologize. This is my first meeting with you. So I'll add you to that list. But, you know, the deputy director at BMOCA, she and I have been meeting since shortly after she started her new job there. And it's always sort of the question, you know, I don't know what I have in mind, but let's stay in touch and let's figure out where there are some places where we intersect. And I do that with the 2 gals that run BCC. And, you know, and we all have our own thing that we're trying to create.
I think it's interesting. And that's where, like, maybe, and it doesn't have to be us, it could be somebody else, but like I've experienced this before where it almost takes like a neutral, where there's not somebody neutral and it can bring it together and it's like everybody can relax. And maybe that's it. I'm not sure.
Well,
does anybody go ahead?
I think ultimately the connections happen because of relationships. They don't happen because, you know, oh, I know I can get something from you. It really is like, oh, well, okay, they're doing this thing that's different than we're doing, but you know, that's actually a really nice person, and I wouldn't mind working with that person.
Well, I'm just thinking of like unleashing some of the energy here, like all the creative, talented people, like Todd and Will and Sandra and you and Lauren and like and I think that's what we're sensing. I know I am, and I think Todd would say the same, is where there's just not that, it doesn't feel like there's even that celebration or that coming together or the release or the sharing of that type of energy here. And so anyhow, so I know we're going to wrap up soon. Anybody have any insights or takeaways? I'm going to follow up, just so you know, I'm going to follow up after this, because like I don't want this just to be talk. I want to actually help move this conversation forward. So I'm going to follow up with Lauren and follow up with some of you as well.
House, right? In
What's
Will's
that?
studio. Don't we need a party in Will's studio too? Can you follow up on?
Oh yeah. Well, when we can all get together, Todd and I have already started. We're gonna do a big party there. No, we can't speak to that. We haven't talked to him about it. We talked to him informally, but we would love to like get just like a fun event. And Todd, you sounds like you know how to throw parties. So so anybody have anything pressing they wanna add or suggest or
can we hear from Lucian?
Yeah, hi. I do think some common thread between everything we talked about of silos, it all comes down to communication. And I don't think we have a platform for like Will to learn about other artists that are in the community, for all of us to learn about exhibitions, what BMOCA has going on, open studios. And so, I mean, it feels like you guys have a great opportunity, like you said, to be that neutral place and to get all the information in one spot and hopefully get energy around that where people want to contribute.
Yep.
You know, make connections, show up.
Yeah, one of the things we did with Joy Engine in the mid-2000s, part of the blog was a resource for like every art event that was happening between Boulder and Denver. And we managed that for probably 4 years. And by the end of 4 years, you had huge crowds at everything. And sometimes there was too many things happening on one night, but everyone had one place to go to find all the cool shit that was happening.
Here's one takeaway. What if we all, like people on this call and maybe our network, we collaborate on trying to get one event that's like kind of guerrilla, kind of fun, and we find a place to host it and it's not overly complicated. I mean, that might be one way to I don't know, to jumpstart and kind of let the energy kind of release here. I don't know. That's just one idea. So I want to wrap up here. I want to thank you all for the time and for the conversation. And I hope that this is the beginning to something developing to where we can enjoy what we know is here and just like and feel it and participate in it to a greater degree, because we have a lot of talented, passionate people here, and that's what we're looking for. So anyhow, thank you guys. Really appreciate the time.